Hi guys, so in this video for paper 3, unit 6.2, environmental degradation, we will have a look at the effects of globalization on agricultural production. So as with all these sections of work, it's really interesting, really important that we bring a clear and balanced perspective to the material that we're going to study. So this video looks at improving yields and their environmental impacts. Now we've seen all the way through this IB course that there are of course huge environmental impacts on producing food. And this is particularly acute where you look at agribusiness, and even more acute where you look at the process of agro-industrialization. But we do need to be very clear about this. This is, unfortunately, like it or not, a necessary process if we are going to be able to produce enough food. We've come back to this idea again and again and again of that limits to growth. If we didn't use these production methods, there would be a limit to growth and the world would simply not be able to support a population of 7 billion. Now, we do have a global population of 7 billion, and as we know, because of the agriculture imperative, that's going to rise and probably peak around 2050. In the context of those 7 billion people living on the planet, it's also a huge achievement if you do remind yourself that even though there are 7 billion people on the planet, each person per head production of food has never been higher. And of course, we do have poverty and we do have hunger and starvation, and we've seen that through the unit, but these are at a record level. And so that's at the same time as having the highest ever population. So you need to put this into context. We'll watch this video here, which is about agribusiness, specifically agribusiness in Iowa. And a lot of what goes on in Iowa is the production for export as well. And America produces a lot of soya beans, which it then exports to Brazil and to China. So you can see this process of globalization really pushing forward in key agricultural areas, the process of agro-industrialization and agribusiness. When you watch these videos, you do need to understand it in a balanced way. Yes, the video is correct. It does have these environmental and social effects on the area, but allied to that, you have to remember that it does increase food production.
Oh, Iowa, it's so beautiful. And it's like, if you really knew, we can't drink the water, we can't breathe the air, you know, the soil's dead. It's this facade.
The politicians, they never once talk about the soil loss. They don't talk about the pollution, you know, the water. They don't talk about the attrition. You know, mining, we're mining the ground. It's just not good.
The factory farming model of these confinement buildings, in my opinion, is the worst thing that's happened to the state of Iowa or other states where it's in.
Today, what we have in Iowa is about 10,000 factory farm operations that raise 22 million hogs, millions of beef cattle, and produce the country's most eggs.
It just makes me cringe when Iowans talk about they're number one in soybeans, they're number one in hog production, they're number one in that. We're number one in sacrificing our land to agribusiness, to deplete our natural resources, to leave nothing here but a desert.
We have a dominant system of agriculture in Iowa that is essentially monoculture farming. It's heavily dependent on chemical fertilizers and animal waste to fertilize farm fields that oftentimes are overapplied and end up running off into our waterways.
Farmers in Iowa are constantly told that what they're doing is a good thing because they're feeding the world. They're not. The world is not eating these corn and soybeans. Most of the corn and soybeans grown here go to livestock feed, and a lot of the corn goes to ethanol production.
Family farmers faced a choice. They either had to get big, grow their operations, or get out of farming. the impact that that's had on our rural communities is tragic.
Each small town now has boarded up businesses on Main Street, and the population keeps declining out here all the time. Family farming has almost disappeared.
While ethanol plants and packing plants have been presented as growth opportunities for rural Iowa, these are short-term fixes and are not going to bring long-term solutions to our rural communities.
Our schools have closed, several schools from different districts around here. We have very few businesses keeping these small towns going. If this is with such a big economic boom, our schools ought to be thriving, our small towns should be thriving. It's all about the mighty buck.
Farmers in Iowa continue engaging in this monoculture cropping system, planting corn and soybeans year after year in rotation because they're trapped in a system that's dominated by big agriculture.
All of our citizens need to understand that this is an unsustainable agricultural system we're in.
What we're losing is very precious and important. We're losing the connection to the land, losing the farmer who farms that land and cares about community and cares about the food that grows. It's becoming much more.
Okay, so in this video, you can see that they're not only talking about the environmental effects, but they're also talking about the socio-economic effects of agribusiness and agro-industrialization. A point was made about what exactly all of these crops are being used. The soybean and the grain, a lot of that is going to animal feed. Despite what the lady said, that is going to feed people. It's just being transformed into beef and chicken. She made a comment there about some of the grain being used for ethanol production. This video is a few years old and they've actually stopped using large amounts of grain for ethanol production because they've realised actually it's very, very inefficient and a complete waste of food.
Just a business.
Ultimately, what we need is a food and farming system that's good for farmers, that's good for workers, that's good for eaters, and that's good for our environment.
There was a time when the average number of crops grown on an Iowa farm was 34. Now it's 2. In the environment, diversity builds resilience. Diversity in our ag economy builds resilience too.
Society has evolved.
Okay, so the point that she made there is quite important. By going down this monoculture route or transforming a farm from growing 35 crops to 2, yes, it's much more efficient and yes, it's a lot more economically productive, but it leaves the system, the farming system, very, very vulnerable and leaves the environment very, very vulnerable. If there were a fall in prices for that particular agricultural produce, and that's all your farm produced, that's going to cause a problem. If there was disease that affected that crop, that is going to be quite a significant problem for you as well. But also this lack of biodiversity means the agricultural system and the plants and the biomass within the system is very, very unstable and very, very vulnerable. That biodiversity does build in resilience, both economic and biological resilience and environmental resilience, but it does come at a cost of efficiency. So as with everything in life, there is a balance between those two extremes. It's important that we do strike a balance because what we don't want to do is we don't want to compromise our ability to grow enough food to ensure that people have enough to eat.
And the bigger is better, and it's not.
It's dog eat dog, and we got to change that. We got to get back to more humanity.
If we don't do something now to protect this land and make it available for the common good in Iowa, for better public health, for better soils, for better waters, for a better economy, then we're going to be hurting worse than we could ever imagine.
Okay, so as you can see from that video, it is made by a charity called Action Aid. So it is going to have elements of bias. That's fine, and it's a very useful video and it makes lots of valid points, but you need to understand that the video is very, very one-sided because it's made for a particular reason. So we go back again to this issue of balance. We need to ensure that we have enough food, and the process of globalization has really helped to push forward technological innovation and efficiencies in the agricultural sector. By doing that, agribusiness and agro-industrialization has produced a lot more food, but as we've seen before, all the way through this video, there are considerable costs. We have in this idea that organic farming is the way forward and organic farming is sustainable. Well, obviously, organic farming does have its environmental advantages, but actually when you look at the efficiency of organic farming, it's so inefficient. If all the farms were to convert to organic farming, first of all, we would not be able to produce enough food. And certainly we would not be able to produce enough food for us to eat all of that meat that we love so much. In addition to that, you'd actually have to increase the area of land that you're farming. So what that would mean is what little ecosystems there are, natural virgin ecosystems there are left, we'd have to start eating into that and cutting it down. So when you look at it holistically in those terms, organic farming does have its advantages, but also it has quite considerable disadvantages as well, particularly when you're looking at the area of land that need to be brought under production if the lower level organic farming method was used universally. And we simply can't do that. And it would be so expensive, it'll be prohibitively expensive, and we won't be able to produce enough food. Not a position that we want to work towards with the agricultural imperative. So as with all these things, it's important that you bring balance to your answer and you see both sides of the argument.